The Galactic Military Academy of Vorth Prime had seen many foolish decisions in its 3,000-year history. But this was monumentally stupid, even by their standards. Commander Zolf clicked his 4 mandibles in annoyance as he watched the holographic display flicker to life in the main auditorium. 200 of the galaxy's finest military cadets from 17 different species sat in perfect rows, their attention focused on the stage where Dean Carvex stood with what could only be described as predatory glee. "Esteemed cadets," Carvex began, his voice booming through the amphitheater with theatrical flair, "today marks a historic moment in Academy tradition. For the first time in centuries, we have acquired a genuine Class S Apex Predator specimen." A collective murmur rippled through the crowd. Class S designation was reserved for the most dangerous creatures in known space. Things that could single-handedly wipe out entire colonies. Things that made hardened warriors wake up screaming. Zolf's eye stalks twitched nervously. He had a very bad feeling about this. Just one thing before we begin. YouTube tells me 94.3% of you watching aren't subscribed. Subscribing is free. It really supports the channel, and you'll get more amazing HFY Sci-fi stories delivered straight to you. Don't miss out. "This creature," Carvex continued, clearly enjoying the suspense, "hails from a recently contacted world in the Outer Rim. A death world where survival requires constant adaptation and ruthless efficiency. Ladies, gentlemen, and various other classifications, I present to you a human." The auditorium erupted in shocked gasps and nervous chittering. Even Zolf felt his breathing sacs constrict. Humans were legendary among military circles, whispered about in hushed tones. They were the species that had somehow survived on a planet where literally everything tried to kill them, then had the audacity to domesticate their predators and call them pets. The holographic display shifted, showing a containment cell deep within the Academy's lower levels. Inside, a small figure sat cross-legged on the floor, seemingly unbothered by the reinforced quantum barriers surrounding her. She was tiny by galactic standards, barely reaching the chest height of most species present. Her skin was a pale, peachy color, and strange fiber-like growths sprouted from her head in a reddish-brown cascade. Most unsettling were her forward-facing eyes, the unmistakable mark of a predator species. "This is Kira Voss," Carvex announced with obvious pride. "Age 17 in human years, which we're told is barely considered adult by their species. She volunteered for our exchange program and has been most cooperative." "Cooperative?" Zolf thought skeptically. The girl looked about as cooperative as a plasma grenade with a loose pin. "Now then," Carvex's voice took on a challenging tone. "According to our intelligence reports, humans possess an unusual psychological trait they call stubbornness, combined with something even more terrifying: creativity. Our xenobiologists assure us that while physically unremarkable, humans compensate with unpredictable tactical thinking and an apparent immunity to logical surrender conditions." A Kelleran cadet in the front row raised a tentacled appendage. "Sir, you're not seriously suggesting we actually engage this creature in combat, are you?" "Not just suggesting it, Cadet Thylex," Carvex replied with a grin that showed far too many teeth. "I'm making it mandatory. Any cadet who can defeat our human guest in single combat will receive immediate advancement to officer candidate rank, plus full honors graduation." The auditorium fell silent except for the nervous clicking of various exoskeletons and the soft whoosh of respiratory systems working overtime. Kira Voss, meanwhile, had apparently heard the announcement through whatever monitoring system they had in her cell. She stood up, stretched in a way that made several cadets unconsciously step back from their seats, and looked directly at the camera. Then, impossibly, she smiled. It was not a reassuring expression. Zolf had studied human facial expressions as part of his xenobiology minor. That particular smile, according to his textbooks, was classified as predatory anticipation with undertones of barely contained violence. The technical term was grinning, but the informal translation was roughly equivalent to, "I'm about to ruin your entire day, and I'm going to enjoy every second of it." "Sir," a brave Silthan cadet spoke up, her crystalline body refracting the auditorium lights nervously. "What exactly are the engagement rules? Are we talking about armed combat? Traditional dueling protocols?" "Excellent question, Cadet Vex," Carvex beamed. "The human has specifically requested what they call freestyle combat. No weapons, no external assistance, no predetermined victory conditions beyond total incapacitation of the opponent. The human claims this is how conflicts are typically resolved on their home world." Several cadets fainted on the spot. Zolf wanted to faint too, but his species lacked that particular evolutionary advantage. Instead, he was forced to remain conscious and contemplate the absolute insanity of what was being proposed. "Additionally," Carvex continued, oblivious to the rising panic in his audience, "our guest has made one small request. She wishes to face all challengers simultaneously, as individual duels would be, and, I quote, boring as hell and a waste of everyone's time." More fainting. A few cadets began quietly whimpering in their native languages. "Sir!" A burly Graxian cadet stood up, his forearms flexing impressively. "With all due respect, this seems highly irregular. My species are renowned warriors throughout the sector. Surely one small human cannot present a significant challenge to trained military personnel?" Carvex consulted his datapad with theatrical precision. "Ah, yes, your species record. Very impressive, Cadet Morks. Your people have won approximately 63% of all documented conflicts over the past millennium. Truly formidable." He paused for effect. "The pre-humans have never lost a war. Ever. In their entire recorded history." Morks sat down very quickly. "But surely," another voice called out, this time from a winged Ethan near the back, "that's just because they haven't faced truly advanced opponents? Their technology level is still primitive compared to galactic standards." "True," Carvex nodded sagely. "They only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Their weapons are crude by our standards. Their medicine is almost barbaric. And yet," he gestured to the hologram where Kira had begun what appeared to be some sort of ritualistic preparation routine involving rapid limb movements. "Is she exercising?" Cadet Thylex asked in horror. "Warming up," Zolf corrected grimly. "My research indicates humans perform these rituals before engaging in strenuous physical activity. It supposedly prevents injury to their remarkably flexible musculoskeletal system." As if to demonstrate this point, Kira bent herself into a position that defied several laws of physics and at least 3 principles of anatomical possibility. The collective wince from the audience was audible. "The engagement will commence in 1 standard hour," Carvex announced. "All participants should report to Combat Arena 7 for preliminary medical scans and equipment distribution. I suggest you use this time wisely." As the cadets began filing out in various states of existential dread, Zolf noticed something that made his blood run cold. Throughout the entire announcement, Kira Voss had maintained that same predatory smile. But now she was doing something even more unsettling. She was humming. Zolf's research had mentioned human humming behavior. It was apparently something they did when they were particularly pleased about something. The fact that a caged apex predator was humming while surrounded by military-grade containment barriers suggested a level of confidence that bordered on the supernatural. Down in Combat Arena 7, the preliminary preparations were not going well. "Medical scan complete for Cadet Thylex," announced the automated system in its annoyingly cheerful voice. "Vital signs elevated but within acceptable parameters. Stress hormones at 97% of maximum safe levels. Recommendation: consider light sedatives and possibly a career change." Thylex's tentacles drooped in defeat. He wasn't even in the arena yet, and the scanner was already suggesting he quit the military entirely. The equipment distribution was equally problematic. Standard combat gear for most species included reinforced exoskeletons, energy shields, and various enhancement systems designed to level the playing field between different physiologies. The human, however, had refused all equipment except for something called athletic wear, which appeared to be nothing more than decorative fabric coverings. "She's not even wearing armor," Cadet Vex whispered to her squad mate. "How is this fair?" "Maybe it's psychological. Warfare," suggested a reptilian Sorok cadet named Kreth. "Make us think she's overconfident, so we drop our guard?" "Or maybe," Zolth said quietly as he reviewed the medical readouts, "she doesn't need armor because she's planning something we haven't considered." The human's medical scan had been interesting. Her baseline physiological readings were unlike anything in the galactic database. Her resting heart rate was higher than most species' combat stress levels. Her muscle density was ridiculous for her size, and her brain activity patterns showed regions lighting up that the scanner couldn't even properly categorize. "Attention cadets," the arena's control system announced. "Participant transfer commencing. Please maintain safe distance from the combat zone." The massive blast doors at the far end of the arena began to iris open with a deep mechanical rumble. Through the opening, a single figure walked with casual confidence that made every military instinct in the room scream warnings. Kira Voss looked even smaller in person, which somehow made her infinitely more terrifying. She wore simple black garments that seemed designed for mobility rather than protection. Her reddish hair was tied back in what human databases called a ponytail, a practical arrangement that kept it out of her face. But it was her expression that made Zolth's exoskeleton rattle with involuntary fear responses. She wasn't angry or aggressive, or even particularly focused. She looked amused. "Hello, everyone," she called out in perfectly accented galactic standard, her voice carrying easily across the arena. "Thanks for having me. This is going to be fun." The way she said fun made it sound like a threat. 137 cadets stood arrayed against her in standard formation, representing the finest military training the galaxy had to offer. They had energy weapons, personal shields, combat enhancement systems, and numerical superiority that would make victory mathematically certain against any rational opponent. Unfortunately, as Zolth was beginning to suspect, rationality might not apply here. "Engagement parameters set," the arena announced. "Victory conditions: total incapacitation of opposing force. Medical teams standing by. Combat may commence on participant readiness confirmation." "Ready when you are," Kira called out cheerfully, rolling her shoulders in a movement that somehow looked both casual and deeply threatening. The cadets exchanged nervous glances. Protocol suggested they should coordinate their approach, establish firing lines, maybe attempt diplomatic negotiation first. Instead, Cadet Morks let out a battle cry and charged. It was exactly the wrong thing to do, and Zolth knew it the moment the Graxian's 4 feet left the ground in his species' traditional flying tackle maneuver. Humans, according to his research, were persistence hunters. They didn't rely on raw strength or speed. They relied on endurance, pattern, recognition, and tactical adaptation. Letting them observe your attack patterns was like handing them a detailed manual on how to defeat you. Kira sidestepped Morks's charge with minimal effort, grabbed one of his arms as he flew past, and used his own momentum to redirect him face first into the arena wall with a sickening crunch. The entire sequence took maybe 2 seconds. "One down," she called out conversationally. 136 to go. Anyone else want to try the direct approach? The remaining cadets suddenly realized they were not dealing with a typical combat scenario. This wasn't a military exercise or a sporting competition. This was a predator who had just been presented with a convenient meal delivery service. "Coordinated attack pattern Delta," Cadet Vex shouted, trying to impose some order on the growing panic. "Energy weapons, suppression fire, maintain distance." It was a textbook response, and under normal circumstances, it would have been devastatingly effective. Energy bolts began filling the air as the cadets spread out to establish overlapping fields of fire. Any sane opponent would have been forced to take cover, allowing the attackers to control the engagement tempo. Kira Voss, however, did something that made Zolth's brain temporarily stop processing information correctly. She ran directly into the weapons fire, not toward cover, not in a defensive crouch. She sprinted at full speed straight toward the densest concentration of energy bolts, weaving between them with movements that seemed to defy both physics and common sense. "Impossible," Thylex breathed. "Nothing organic can move like that." But she was moving like that, and worse, she was getting closer to the firing line with each passing second. Her movements weren't random either. Zolth could see the pattern forming as she advanced. She was reading the firing sequences, predicting the timing, turning the cadets' own coordination against them. The first line of shooters suddenly found themselves facing a small, grinning human who had somehow appeared in their midst like a materialized nightmare. What followed was less a combat sequence and more a physics demonstration on the creative applications of leverage, momentum, and anatomical weak points. Cadet Thylex discovered that humans could grip with shocking strength when Kira grabbed 2 of his tentacles and used them to swing him into 3 of his squad mates. Cadet Vex learned that her crystalline physiology, while beautiful, had predictable fracture points when the human struck her at precisely the right angle with what appeared to be a simple finger tap. "Fall back! Fall back!" someone screamed over the comms, but falling back proved problematic when your opponent could apparently move faster than your retreat speed. Zolth watched in fascinated horror as Kira Voss systematically dismantled 17 different species combat doctrines simultaneously. She used a Saurak's own tail as a weapon against his squad mates. She turned a Kelleran's camouflage ability against him by somehow tracking his movement through sound alone. She even managed to short-circuit a mechanoid cadet's energy systems by throwing a handful of arena sand into precisely the right ventilation port. "Sir," Zolth spoke into his communicator, trying to keep the panic out of his voice, "perhaps we should consider stopping the exercise." "Absolutely not," came Dean Carvex's voice over the comm, tinged with manic enthusiasm. "This is unprecedented data collection opportunity. Do you see how she's adapting to each species' individual combat capabilities? Remarkable." Remarkable was one word for it. Terrifying was another. By the 15-minute mark, half the cadets were unconscious, incapacitated, or had wisely chosen to play dead. The remaining 68 had formed a defensive circle in the center of the arena, energy shields interlocked, weapons pointed outward in all directions. "This is insane," Cadet Vex whispered from inside the formation. Her earlier confidence had evaporated, along with a significant portion of her crystal matrix. She's just one individual. How is this possible? Because, Kira's voice drifted from somewhere outside their formation, you're all thinking like civilized beings. Problem is, I'm not from a civilized world. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Several cadets spun around, trying to pinpoint her location, but she had somehow vanished into the arena's shadows despite the bright overhead lighting. Humans aren't pack hunters, she continued, her tone conversational and deeply unsettling. We're persistence predators. We don't overpower our prey. We outlast it. We study it. We learn its weaknesses. And then, when it's exhausted and desperate and making mistakes, we strike. A Graxian cadet at the edge of the formation suddenly screamed and toppled forward. Kira had somehow gotten underneath their defensive perimeter and struck him at what Zolf's scanner indicated was the exact nerve cluster that would cause temporary paralysis in Graxian physiology. How did she know that? Thylex demanded, his remaining tentacles waving frantically. That's classified anatomical information. She's been watching us fight each other for 15 minutes, Zolf realized with growing dread. She's been learning our anatomy, our reflexes, our tactical preferences. We've been teaching her how to defeat us. The defensive formation began to collapse as panic set in. Cadets started firing wildly at shadows, hitting their own teammates as often as empty air. The careful coordination that had defined their training dissolved into chaos as the stress of being hunted by an invisible predator overwhelmed their military discipline. This is what I don't understand about you people. Kira's voice came from directly behind the formation now, causing several cadets to spin around and accidentally discharge their weapons into their own ranks. You're all so focused on honor and rules and fair fighting. Where I come from, fair fighting is what gets you eaten. She materialized from thin air, or at least that's how it appeared to the increasingly panicked cadets. In reality, Zolf's enhanced sensors showed she had been using the arena's structural elements, moving through shadows and blind spots with a precision that suggested either supernatural awareness or detailed tactical analysis. Probably both. You want to know something funny? Kira asked, as she casually deflected an energy bolt with what appeared to be a piece of debris she'd picked up from the arena floor. Back home, I'm not even considered particularly good at fighting. I'm more of an academic type, actually. I study alien cultures and languages. She ducked under a swing from a massive Krulon cadet, grabbed his arm, and used a technique that sent him flying across the arena to crash into a group of his teammates. My little sister? She's the scary one in the family. She wrestles predators for fun. My big brother? He builds things that explode. My mom? She used to hunt creatures that could level city blocks, and she did it with primitive projectile weapons and a really bad attitude. The remaining cadets were beginning to understand that they weren't facing a warrior. They were facing what humans apparently considered a nerd. The funny thing is, Kira continued, now moving through their formation like a force of nature, systematically incapacitating anyone who came within reach. You all keep treating this like it's some kind of test of strength or skill. But that's not what this is. She paused her assault for a moment, standing in the middle of the arena surrounded by unconscious or groaning cadets, looking perfectly relaxed despite having just systematically dismantled what was supposedly the finest military academy in the galaxy. This is a learning experience, she said, her smile becoming somehow even more unsettling. You're learning what it means to fight something that evolved on a world where everything wants to kill you. And I'm learning how your species fight, how you think, how you react under pressure. She looked directly at the observation camera, as if she could see through it to where Dean Carvex and the other faculty members were watching. "The question is," she continued, "what exactly did you think you were going to accomplish by putting me in a cage and calling me your entertainment? Did you really think I was just going to sit quietly and be your dancing monkey?" Zolth felt his stomach drop as the implications hit him. This wasn't a demonstration of human combat capability. This was a breakout. "Oh," Kira added with that same terrifying smile, "and just so we're clear, this containment cell you've got me in, I figured out how to escape about 6 hours after you put me in there. I've just been waiting for the right moment to make my point." The holographic display flickered, and suddenly every alarm in the academy began screaming at once. In her cell, Kira Voss was gone. The quantum barriers were intact, the security systems showed no signs of breach, and the containment protocols remained fully operational. She had simply vanished. "This is impossible!" Dean Carvex's voice crackled over the emergency communication system. "The containment field is still active. The quantum locks are engaged. How did she—" His voice cut off abruptly, replaced by a new transmission coming from the Academy's central command center. "Hello, everyone," Kira's cheerful voice filled the arena. "Thanks for the lovely accommodations, but I think I'll be taking my leave now. Don't worry about me. I'll find my own way home. Your security systems are really quite educational." The implications were staggering. She hadn't just escaped from a maximum security containment cell. She had somehow gained access to the Academy's central communications array, which meant she had complete access to their computer systems, their security protocols, their strategic databases. Everything. "Oh, and cadets?" Her voice continued with obvious amusement. "You all fought very bravely. Really impressive stuff. Your instructors should be proud. But maybe next time, don't try to cage something unless you're absolutely certain you understand what it's capable of." The transmission ended, leaving the arena in stunned silence. Zolth looked around at the carnage. Over 100 of the galaxy's finest military cadets, defeated by a single human teenager who had apparently been holding back the entire time. Not only defeated, but systematically educated on exactly why they had never stood a chance. Dean Carvex's voice returned to the communication system, considerably less confident than before. "Security teams to all sectors. Priority Alpha lockdown initiated. Locate and attempt peaceful reestablishment of contact with our guest." "Sir," Zolth spoke into his communicator, "I don't think she's planning to stay for negotiations." Through the arena's transparent ceiling, they could see a small figure moving across the Academy's outer courtyards, with the casual confidence of someone taking a pleasant evening stroll. Kira Voss was walking toward the spaceport, apparently unconcerned about the dozens of security drones that were failing to locate her, despite flying directly overhead. "How is she doing that?" Cadet Vex whispered, supporting herself against a wall as medical teams worked on her shattered crystal matrix. "Stealth technology?" suggested Thylex weakly. "No," Zolth said quietly, his research finally providing the answer he'd been dreading. "She's not using technology. She's using biology. Humans evolved as persistence hunters on a world where being seen meant death. They're naturally adapted to avoid detection by predators significantly more dangerous than anything we have here." The observation was met with silence as everyone contemplated the implications. On the security monitors, Kira Voss reached the spaceport perimeter and paused. For a moment, it looked like she might turn around, perhaps to surrender or negotiate. Instead, she waved. Not at the security cameras or the observation posts, or any of the visible monitoring equipment. She waved directly at the main academy building, as if she could see through the walls to where they were all watching her. Then she smiled that same predatory smile, turned around, and walked directly onto a departing civilian transport, as if she belonged there. The ship lifted off normally, cleared the traffic control zone without incident, and jumped to hyperspace before anyone thought to check the passenger manifest. Dean Carvex's strangled voice came over the communications one final time. Medical teams to Combat Arena 7. Administrative teams to my office. And someone, please explain to me how we just lost our most secure prisoner to what appears to have been an elaborate practical joke. Zolth looked around at the defeated cadets, the shattered equipment, and the growing realization that they had just been schooled by a teenage alien who had treated their maximum security military facility like a mildly challenging puzzle game. The Academy had unveiled what they thought was a caged apex predator. They had been absolutely right about the apex predator part. They had been catastrophically wrong about the caged part. And somewhere in hyperspace, Kira Voss was probably still humming. 3 days later, Commander Zolth received the communication that would haunt his nightmares for cycles to come. Vorth Prime Academy, this is Captain Torres of the human vessel Persistence. We're here to collect our student. The transmission came from a ship that had somehow appeared in their star system without triggering a single early warning sensor. It sat in space roughly 50,000 kilometers from the Academy, looking like nothing more than a slightly oversized cargo hauler. Dean Carvex, who had spent the last 72 hours explaining to increasingly angry Galactic Council representatives how he had managed to lose a diplomatic guest, practically lunged for the communication console. "Captain Torres, thank the void you're here. We've had a slight misunderstanding with your crew member. She seems to have departed without proper clearance." The pause that followed was long enough for Zolth to contemplate several unpleasant career alternatives. "Let me understand this correctly," Captain Torres finally replied, her voice carrying the kind of measured calm that experienced soldiers recognized as barely controlled fury. "You took a 17-year-old girl who volunteered for your cultural exchange program, locked her in a cage, and then used her as entertainment for your students." "It wasn't entertainment," Carvex protested. "It was a valuable learning exercise, a chance for our cadets to test themselves against a kid who was supposed to be your guest," Torres interrupted. "A kid who, according to our tracking systems, had to break out of your maximum security facility and hitchhike her way to a neutral space station to contact us." Zolth winced. The Academy's investigation into Kira's escape had revealed security failures so comprehensive that they bordered on the supernatural. She had somehow acquired detailed schematics of the entire facility, bypassed 17 different monitoring systems, and gained administrative access to their central computer core, all while maintaining the pretense of being a helpless prisoner. "Captain," Carvex tried again, "I assure you this was simply a cultural misunderstanding. If your crew member would return to the Academy, we could discuss." "Oh, she's already back," Torres said cheerfully. "Has been for about 6 hours now. We just wanted to give you time to figure that out yourselves." Every security alarm in the Academy immediately began shrieking. Zolth felt his exoskeleton lock up as the implications hit him. Kira Voss was back on the Academy grounds, had been for hours, and their security systems had just now noticed. "Where exactly?" Carvex asked, in a voice that suggested his sanity was hanging by a very thin thread. "Is she located?" "According to her last check-in, your main computer core. She's been downloading your tactical databases for the past few hours. Something about comparative military doctrine analysis for her thesis project." The sound Dean Carvex made was not translatable into any known language, but it roughly approximated the noise a small animal makes when being consumed by a much larger predator. "Don't worry, though," Torres continued with obvious satisfaction. "She's being very careful not to access any classified information. She's only downloading the stuff you use for training exercises. Public knowledge, really." Zolth's datapad chimed with an incoming priority message. The contents made his breathing sacs seize up entirely. Security log entry 7749. Unauthorized access detected in training database archive. Estimated data transfer 847 terabytes. Duration 6.7 hours. Method unknown. Note: access permissions appear to have been legitimately granted by Dean Carvex's personal authorization codes. "How?" Zolth whispered. "Did she get the Dean's access codes?" His question was answered by another chime from his datapad. This message was from Kira herself. "Hi, Commander Zolth. Thanks for all the fascinating research you shared about human psychology during your briefings. Very helpful for understanding how you think. By the way, your Dean's password was Superior Species 123. You might want to suggest better cybersecurity practices. Also, I left something for you in the faculty lounge. Consider it a thank you gift for being the only one who seemed to understand what you were dealing with." K. The faculty lounge was a restricted area. 3 levels above the main academy floors, accessible only to senior staff with highest level clearance. The fact that Kira had casually mentioned leaving something there meant she had been everywhere in their facility. Everywhere. When Zolth arrived at the faculty lounge, he found a handwritten note on genuine paper, written in ink that somehow formed perfect galactic standard characters despite being produced by an alien hand that had no business knowing their writing system. "Commander Zolth, your xenobiology research was actually pretty accurate. Humans are persistence predators, and we do adapt quickly to new environments. What your research missed, though, is that we're also social creatures. We don't just hunt individually. We hunt in packs, and when you threaten one of us, you get all of us. The ship in your system isn't here for pickup. It's here for payback. You've got about 10 minutes to evacuate your academy before my mom arrives. Trust me, you don't want to meet my mom when she's angry. She makes me look like a diplomat. Good luck. Kira Voss, cultural exchange student, and definitely not your prisoner." Zolth's datapad immediately lit up with proximity alerts. The human cargo ship had launched several smaller vessels, and they were approaching the academy at speeds that violated several traffic control regulations and at least 2 laws of physics. "All personnel, this is Commander Zolth," he broadcast over the academy-wide emergency channel. "Immediate evacuation protocol Omega. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. All staff and students to emergency transport stations immediately." "Zolth, what's happening?" Dean Carvex's voice crackled over his personal communicator. "The human ship is hailing us directly. They're demanding to speak with Academy leadership." "Where are you now, sir?" "My office, obviously. I'm not running from a bunch of primitive." The transmission cut off, replaced by a new voice that made Zolth's survival instincts scream warnings. "This is Colonel Sarah Voss, 3rd Human Expeditionary Force. The child you decided to cage and use for entertainment is my daughter. I'm coming to collect her personally. You have exactly 8 minutes to have all personnel clear of the Academy grounds before I demonstrate why my species has never lost a war." Unlike Kira's cheerful, almost playful tone, Colonel Voss spoke with the quiet certainty of someone who had personally ended civilizations before breakfast and considered it routine maintenance. "Sir," Zolth tried to reach Dean Carvex again. We need to evacuate immediately. The human military response appears to be— Zolf, Kira's voice suddenly came through his communicator, somehow having accessed his personal channel. You seem like a decent sort, so here's some free advice. When my mom says 8 minutes, she means 8 minutes. Not 8 minutes and 30 seconds. Not 7 minutes and 59 seconds. 8 minutes exactly. She's very punctual about her violence. Where are you? Zolf asked, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. Oh, I'm in the dean's office now. He's fine, by the way. Just unconscious. Humans call it a sleeper hold. Very humane, really. He'll wake up in a few hours with nothing worse than a headache and a severely damaged ego. Through his office window, Zolf could see streams of panicked faculty and students fleeing toward the emergency transport stations. The evacuation was proceeding with remarkable efficiency, driven by the kind of primal terror that transcended species boundaries. Kira, he said carefully, what exactly is your mother planning to do to our academy? Honestly, probably nothing too dramatic. She's actually pretty reasonable when she's not defending her kids. She'll probably just disable your defense systems, hack your computers, and leave you with a detailed report on all the security vulnerabilities she exploited to get here undetected. That actually didn't sound too bad. Of course, Kira continued with obvious amusement. That's assuming nobody does anything stupid in the next 6 minutes. If someone tries to fight her or threatens me, well, she might get creative. Through the Academy's external sensors, Zolf watched a small shuttle detach from the human ship and begin its approach. It moved with the kind of controlled precision that suggested military-grade piloting and complete familiarity with hostile environments. Attention Academy personnel, Colonel Voss's voice came over the general communication channel. Your evacuation is proceeding adequately. Continue to the designated safe areas, and you will not be harmed. I have no quarrel with students or faculty who were not involved in the decision to imprison my daughter. Imprison. The word hit Zolf like a physical blow. That's exactly what they had done, wasn't it? They had taken a visiting student and locked her in a cell for their entertainment. No wonder the humans were angry. However, Colonel Voss continued, whoever authorized this incident will be held accountable. I suggest they make themselves available for discussion. In the background of the transmission, Zolf could hear what sounded like weapon systems powering up. Mom, Kira's voice joined the channel. Remember what we talked about? Proportional response? I remember, sweetheart. Don't worry. I'm being very restrained. Restrained. Zolf wondered what unrestrained looked like, and immediately decided he never wanted to find out. The shuttle touched down in the Academy's main courtyard with a gentle precision that somehow made it more intimidating than if it had crashed through the roof. The boarding ramp lowered, and a figure emerged that made everyone still watching the security feeds understand exactly where Kira Voss had inherited her particular brand of terrifying competence. Colonel Sarah Voss was taller than her daughter, with darker hair and the kind of bearing that suggested she had personally introduced various hostile entities to the concept of human stubbornness. She wore what appeared to be standard military fatigues, but her movement patterns suggested someone who could turn anything within reach into a weapon, including the environment itself. Kira, honey, where are you? She called out conversationally. Dean's office, 3rd floor, came the reply from the Academy's speakers. I left him a note explaining everything, very detailed. I think he'll understand the situation much better when he wakes up. Colonel Voss nodded and began walking toward the main building with the kind of purposeful stride that had probably preceded several small wars. Wait, Zolf spoke into his communicator. Colonel Voss, I'm Commander Zolf. I was involved in the research about your daughter's capabilities. I think there may be a misunderstanding here." She paused and looked directly at the camera, her expression remarkably similar to her daughter's predatory smile. "Commander, I've reviewed the security footage of what you people did to my child. There's no misunderstanding. You locked up a visiting student and used her as entertainment for your military training program. But she volunteered for the cultural exchange," Zolf protested weakly. "She volunteered to study your educational systems and share information about human culture. She did not volunteer to be your circus attraction." Colonel Voss resumed walking, and Zolf realized with growing dread that she was heading directly for the building's main structural supports. "What are you doing?" he asked desperately. "Collecting my daughter and teaching your institution about the importance of proper guest treatment," she replied matter-of-factly. "But the building? We'll survive, probably. I'm being very careful to only disable non-essential systems." The Academy's main power grid suddenly went dark. "That was essential," Zolf yelped. "No, that was convenience. Essential systems are life support and gravity. Everything else is optional." True to her word, the emergency lighting remained functional, and the artificial gravity continued working normally. However, every computer system, every security protocol, and every automated defense mechanism had just become expensive paperweights. "Kira, sweetheart, I'm in the building now," Colonel Voss called out. "Third floor, Mom. Take the stairs. The elevators are down." "I noticed. Very thorough work on the power grid, by the way." "Thanks. I learned from the best." Zolf watched helplessly as mother and daughter conducted their casual conversation, while systematically demonstrating that the galaxy's premier military academy had the security profile of a daycare center. 2 minutes later, the Academy's external cameras picked up both humans walking calmly toward their shuttle. Kira carried what appeared to be a small bag of personal belongings. Colonel Voss carried Dean Carvex. "Is he? Zolfi?" began to ask. "Unconscious but unharmed," Colonel Voss confirmed. "He'll wake up with a comprehensive understanding of why caging sentient beings for entertainment purposes violates approximately 47 different interstellar treaties." "You're taking him?" "Temporarily. He'll be returned once he's completed a brief educational seminar on proper diplomatic protocols. Consider it community service." They reached their shuttle, and Kira paused at the boarding ramp. "Commander Zolf," she called out, somehow knowing exactly which camera to address. "Your research was actually really good. You understood what humans were capable of better than anyone else here. Maybe next time, trust your instincts when they tell you something is a bad idea." "Will there be a next time?" Zolf asked, dreading the answer. Kira and her mother exchanged a look that suggested an entire conversation in a few seconds. "Maybe," Kira replied with that same terrifying smile. "Humans are curious by nature. We like learning new things. But next time, perhaps we could try actual cultural exchange instead of gladiatorial combat?" "Of course," Zolf agreed quickly. "Absolutely. No more combat demonstrations." "Good. Oh, and Zolf, you might want to review your Academy's entrance requirements. I downloaded your entire curriculum database, and honestly, your tactical courses could use some work." The shuttle's boarding ramp closed, and the small craft lifted off with the same casual precision with which it had arrived. Within minutes, it had rejoined the larger human vessel, which promptly vanished into hyperspace without so much as a goodbye transmission. The Academy grounds fell silent, except for the distant sounds of emergency crews working to restore power, and the soft whimpering of cadets receiving medical attention. Zolf stood in the empty command center, surrounded by dark screens, and the growing realization that everything he thought he knew about military doctrine had just been comprehensively debunked by a teenager and her mother. His datapad chimed one final time. The message was from an encrypted source, but he recognized the writing style immediately. "Commander, thanks for being reasonable during our visit. As promised, I'm attaching a detailed analysis of your Academy's security vulnerabilities, along with recommended improvements. Also included, tactical assessment reports on all 17 species represented in your cadet corps, plus some suggestions for updating your training programs to account for asymmetric warfare principles. Consider it payment for the educational opportunity you provided. Humans believe in fair trade, even when the initial terms were somewhat coercive. Oh, and one more thing. Tell your dean that my mom left him a reading list. It's all about interstellar diplomatic law and proper treatment of exchange students. She strongly recommends he complete it before we submit our official report to the Galactic Council. Best. Regards, Kira Voss, cultural exchange student, and apparently your new tactical consultant." The attached files contained more detailed military intelligence than most governments accumulated in decades of research. Combat assessments, psychological profiles, technological analyses, strategic recommendations, all compiled during her brief imprisonment and presented with the casual generosity of someone sharing homework notes. Zolth scrolled through document after document, each one demonstrating a level of analytical capability that put their entire intelligence division to shame. She hadn't just been observing their military capabilities. She had been conducting a comprehensive evaluation of galactic military doctrine, and finding it wanting. The final file was labeled Personal Observations, and contained what appeared to be Kira's informal thoughts on her Academy experience. The funniest part, she had written, was watching everyone assume that being human meant I was naturally violent. Sure, we're good at fighting when we need to be, but that's not what makes us dangerous. What makes us dangerous is that we're really, really good at learning. We watch, we adapt, we improvise, and we never, ever forget a lesson. The Academy taught me that galactic military doctrine relies too heavily on technological superiority and species-specific advantages. That's a weakness. Every species fights the way their biology and culture tell them to fight. Humans fight the way the situation demands. That's why we win. She was right, of course. Every tactical manual in their database assumed opponents would behave according to predictable biological and cultural patterns. Human behavior patterns, apparently, included ignore all patterns and do whatever seems most effective at the moment. No wonder they had never lost a war. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Council received the official report from the Human Diplomatic Corps. It was, according to all accounts, politely worded and thoroughly devastating. The Academy found itself facing sanctions, mandatory sensitivity training, and a complete overhaul of their exchange student protocols. Dean Carvex, upon his return, had indeed completed his educational seminar with remarkable efficiency. He now spoke frequently about the importance of treating all sentient beings with respect and dignity, regardless of their species' reputation or apparent capabilities. He also tended to flinch whenever anyone mentioned the word human. The Academy's new exchange student program proved remarkably popular. Word had spread throughout the galaxy that humans were not only dangerous opponents, but surprisingly effective teachers. Requests for cultural exchange partnerships flooded in from military academies across dozens of star systems. Apparently, everyone wanted to learn how to fight like a human, except for Vorth Prime Academy, which had learned quite enough, thank you very much. Commander Zolth kept Kira's C, tactical analyses on his personal datapad, reading them whenever he needed reminding that the universe was far more complex and dangerous than any textbook suggested. Her insights had revolutionized his understanding of interspecies warfare and had probably prevented several major conflicts by highlighting critical vulnerabilities in standard galactic defense protocols. He also kept her mother's contact information, just in case any other brilliant Academy administrators decided to cage apex predators for entertainment purposes. The last entry in his personal log from that period read simply, "Note to self. When dealing with humans, remember that they are not specimens to be studied or challenges to be overcome. They are partners to be respected, allies to be valued, and opponents to be avoided at all costs. Also, never, under any circumstances, threaten their children. Ever." 6 months later, the Academy received a package from Human Space. Inside was a collection of handwritten thank you notes from Kira, along with copies of her completed thesis project. Comparative Analysis of Galactic Military Doctrine. Why Everyone Except Humans Fights the Same War Over and Over. It became required reading at military academies throughout the galaxy. The final note was addressed specifically to Commander Zolth. "Thanks for being the only one who figured out what you were really dealing with. If you ever want to visit Earth, you're welcome any time. Fair warning, though, my little sister wants to meet the alien who was smart enough to be scared of me. She thinks that's hilarious. Kira." Zolth carefully filed the invitation under potentially fatal career opportunities and went back to updating the Academy's xenobiology curriculum. Some experiences he had learned were educational enough from a safe distance, and some apex predators were best appreciated through very, very thick transparasteel barriers, preferably from another star system entirely. The Academy had wanted to test their students against a caged predator. Instead, they had learned that humans don't get caged. They get underestimated. And that, as every military strategist in the galaxy now understood, was a mistake no one made twice.